Okay, last time we introduced objects. Now let's talk about how we might want to use objects by first talking about how to access object properties. So if we swing back over to our code here, let's go ahead and comment that first section of code out here and start talking about how to access pieces of JavaScript object so that we can use it in our code later. And we'll do this by using the first route. We're going to describe the dot property name notation. If we're referring to our contact object above here, we wanted to access a piece of this. Actually, let's go back here and uncomment this. Comment out the console, perhaps. If we wanted to access the first name, what we would do, and we'll do this with console.log here for an example, is we'd say console.log contact.first name and run the code here by running node and then object.js. What will happen here is this will set up the variable here, right, and then run the code. I'm going to take a side note and just make sure to mention to you that if I were to put this console.log before the creation of this object, it would work the same as variables, right? Basically, it won't work. And the reason being is because you're just like with other variables, your objects have to be created in the program, established in the program before you can reference them in other places. Otherwise, you'd get like an undefined or worse. But anyway, get back to where we were before. When I tell this console to print the first name, I'm using this dot notation. What this dot notation is doing is it's actually telling the code that I know that this is an object and that it has a property first name. Go ahead and print that out. So the computer goes, checks that property, checks for first name, and this is what we get. A couple of gotchas I can think of right away is that case matters here. So I know you're going to fall for this. I fall for it every day, and I've been writing JavaScript for almost a decade now. If I were to spell that incorrectly and tell Node to run it, you'll see that this property is undefined, meaning that it doesn't exist. Why? Well, it's because actually it's case sensitive. This will bite you a number of times. Just try to remember case sensitivity is important in JavaScript. And you'll see once I fix that and rerun the code, it shows up again. So just like the first name, I can do this with the last name as well. Last name using the dot notation. We'll run that code again. You'll see that it prints Paris and then you wish at the next line because I'm calling console.log a couple times here. And I can do the same for favorite color and hobby. So that's one way to access the property. Another way to access a property is to access pieces using the bracket notation. And by the way, I'm kind of making these titles up to make it simple to understand. I'm sure there are more formal ways of explaining what these notations are, but bracket here is going to be referring to this. So let's say again I wanted that first name property. What I could do is I could say contact. I would add these brackets here, open and close square bracket, and inside of those I can add the property name in quotes. So again, first name, and let's go ahead and comment those out, save our work, go down to the terminal, and you'll see here that what's printed out is Paris. And I can do the same thing as before. Also take a copy of that and do the same thing for last name as well. You'll see, oops, misspelled. There it is, it got me right here. Again, case sensitivity. These are the two ways that you'll see that our property is accessed. Now we're going to flip over and talk about how to set properties on an object by first creating a brand new object. Let's go ahead and comment out lines 19 and 20 here and scroll up for a second and look at our contact. So what I showed you at the very beginning of this tutorial is actually how we would create a complete object. There are times where you might want to set up an object, an empty object, and then start populating that object on the fly. And the way you would do that is using the dot notation. So similar to what we saw here before when we were actually accessing those properties here. If you want to set properties on an object using a dot notation, this is the way you would do it. Let's go ahead and create a brand new object. Let's go ahead and say let contact 1 equal open and close bracket. And in fact, we can just keep those next to each other and do nothing. If we were to log out contact 1, which is different from the first contact object we created, we'll go down to the terminal and run that. You'll see that nothing really shows up, but in fact, you could take this out and save that without setting that property and come back down here and run it, and it just says undefined. So what you can start to do is you can start to add properties to variable using the dot notation, and it will start treating it as a brand new object. And this is a JavaScript thing. It's not something that works in every single language that has objects, but this is just something for you to know for JavaScript objects. Instead of leaving this as undefined, what you would do is you would create curly braces here right next to that variable. This will let JavaScript know that you intend to create an object, but right now it's going to be empty if you put nothing in between it, even if there's spaces here. Anyway, moving on. So we have our object ready to start adding things to it. So how do we add things to this object using this dot notation? Remember, the dot notation is something like what we've seen above. Well, it's sort of like this, but what you would do here is you would say contact 1 dot first name, and then you would set that equal to something here. So let's say first name is equal to Paris again. That's easy, right? So now this object is created. Now we're referencing it here, giving it a property. Remember, this property did not exist before. But if I were to go down here and log this again, so press up in the terminal to get the last command and press enter, and you'll see first name Paris is the property here. And I can do the same thing for the other pieces of this. So let's do last name, and obviously you wouldn't click that, but we can come back down below and you'll see last name is also here. Let's do the rest of the properties here. So then you can say favorite color, and it seems to already know what that is because it probably seen this earlier in the code. So again, that favorite color is black. And finally, the favorite hobby. And that is going to be, of course, coding. That and making videos for you, of course. And let's go ahead and print that out down below. And you'll see this object is now the same, right? This is now the same as the one above, except we had done this in pieces. So, and who the heck is Cody? And of course you can use the bracket notation to also set properties as well. So I can do contact 1, but instead of using a dot notation, what I can do is say favorite pet. I'll say that is a dog. Dogs are the best. Now that we have an understanding of this, we'll go down and print it just for proof here. We have a favorite pet. So this was setting properties on an object. Let's put that there for our notes and come down below and talk about some other things we can do with objects, right? So in previous examples, we showed that in the object you can actually set a property, and these properties are typically things like this. You can also have numbers, arrays, and that sort of stuff. Another cool thing about objects is you can actually assign functions. Let's create a function called introduction function, okay? And remember that the kind of new syntax that we talked about, the newer syntax for creating a function here, which you can do this. And let's log out everything under contact 1. How about that? And we'll make it look pretty. So we'll use these fancy quotes here, and underneath here we'll say, hello, my name is, and remember when we are using these quotes, we can actually just spell things out. This way it will print things how we type it, essentially. Okay, And then we can go, my favorite color is, again, this favorite color. And thank you for the cool IDE that's actually figuring out what I want before I finish typing it for the variables. We'll go ahead and finish this up here. This favorite hobby. And finally, we're gonna say, nice to meet you. So what we essentially did is wrote an introduction function, okay? And let's go ahead and run that function first. Console.log introduction function. Remember, if you want to call a function, you always have to put the open and curly parentheses, or if there are parameters, you have to put the parameters in there. So let's do that quick, and you'll see that this function went ahead and printed these things out. And also, you'll see that everything in here is undefined. And the reason is I ran this function by itself here, and I use this magical keyword called this. Now the thing is that it has no idea what we're talking about when I say this. It's a special keyword, and it's one that you use inside of an object. If you don't, then if I say I want to use this, that first name, the property this belongs to nothing. So here we go, we're kind of learning about the reference of this. What we would do with a function like this, we would take this function and you can actually make it a property on the object. So what I can do is I can say, I want the contact1 object to now have a function called introduce yourself. And remember, I am not calling the function. This time I'm going to be setting that function to a variable that I created called introduction function up above. Okay, so I'm not running it, I'm just setting it to this. Okay, so now instead of calling out introduction function, and what I'll do is for our notes, I'll move this up above, and we'll just put some notes here that this should print undefined in the print statement because not an object, and using this keyword, right? But then let's go back here, and I'm going to print out the contract1 object first, just for your viewing here. So not contract, excuse me, contact1. You'll see that now I commented out all the contact1 properties, so we'll go ahead and make those available again here. Clear this up for viewing and print that out again. You'll see that contact1 now has all of this stuff, and not that log. Let's do it one more time here. You'll see that it has all the properties that we set before plus an additional property, which is a function called introduction function. Let's call this function in the object and see what happens. So we're looking at the object. Let's see what happens when we tell this object to introduce itself, huh? So we can go down below and go console.log and tell contact1 to introduce yourself with open and close parentheses, and comment that out and run that. Okay. Interestingly enough, you see we have an undefined for last name, and that's because the last name property up above was misspelled. Case sensitivity is important. And when we go back down here, oh goodness gracious, last name. Let's try that one last time, huh? Let's give the last name a last, okay. My name is Paris, you wish. My favorite color is black. My favorite hobby is coding, and it's nice to meet you. So what's happening here is that I created a variable for this function, and I saved it, this function here, as a variable, but I can also set the property in here just like I would create a function variable. You can also create a function inside of the object in the curly bracket as well. So I can actually say setting to a defined function, and I can actually go back down here and say create contact one dot name favorite game, and I can actually make this a function as well, right? So I can do this in a couple of ways. I could say function, and I can say console.log my favorite game is Super Smash Bros. Melee, right? That was my favorite game of all time, favorite pastime. And now this is set as well. So then below, what I can do is say contact one dot name favorite game, open and close parentheses, because there are no parameters. I can come back down here and I can say my favorite game is Super Smash Bros. Melee. Might be asking, what else can you do with objects pairs? I really want to keep digging in on this. And something else you can do with an object is you can actually set an object inside of an object. So let's say we had a variable called let my computer, and we set that to make, which is Apple, right? Model, and we'll say MacBook Pro, and we'll say color is Galaxy Gray, I believe that's what it is, and we can say year equals 2018. Now what I can do is actually set contact one dot computer equals computer. Log, I can say console.log, and let's just say contact one dot computer, and we can see if we go down here to our console, clear what's there, press the up button a couple times, and we have an issue. Let's see what that is quick. Okay, so boy, you really got to watch that spelling. All right, let's clear this and try one more time. You'll see that this computer is what's being called there. So not only do we have the ability to print out the entire object, or not only do we have access to just that top level object, but just like with the other objects, what we can do is we can actually access the properties within it. So we can also tell the log to actually print the year of the computer, for example. So contact one dot computer dot year. We'll go down here to the bottom, press up, and run that code, and you'll see we have 2018 there. So let's review what we've covered so far. First, we talked about what an object is, how they're typically used in programming, why they're an important nut and bolt to have in your pocket, as well as we talked through some examples of how to set up an object, as well as access to object properties in your program. Let's solidify what we learned by talking through an example of which we might benefit from using an object over our normal pattern of using plain old variables.